That cry didn't belong in a snowstorm, and it hit me like a hand on the chest. The plows had just passed, leaving black slush and wind that tasted like diesel. I was cutting through the back service road by the harbor in Duluth, Minnesota, when I heard it again, thin and shaking, begging anyone to notice. I followed the sound past a chain-link gate and under a loading dock where the snow had drifted into a hard, white wall. A chocolate Labrador mother dog was wedged in the only dry pocket she could find, ribs sharp under muddy fur. 4 newborn puppies, maybe 10 days old, were tucked to her belly, blind, squeaking, trying to stay warm. The Labrador retriever lifted her head and stared at me like I was the last threat left on Earth. Her body trembled so hard the whole little pile of pups moved with her. She didn't bark. She just tightened around them, a Labrador making herself into a shield. I said, "Easy, girl," and I told her my name was Evan, like a name could prove I wasn't there to take. If you've ever heard a puppy cry go quiet in the cold, you know how fast your brain starts counting. Trash and ice were everywhere, frozen wrappers, bent wire, a broken pallet half buried in snow. Her tongue flicked once over the smallest pup, and her eyes never left my hands. Then her front leg slid on the slick concrete, and she couldn't pull it back under her. One puppy squeaked and didn't, and I understood, standing there with my breath fogging the air, that this Labrador and her puppies weren't waiting for help anymore. They were running out of it. Sunlight didn't make the cold kinder. It just showed me the frost on her whiskers and the way her sides pulled in too fast. I went back to my truck and tore open the emergency kit like my hands were someone else's. A thick towel, a clean fleece, and warm water in a thermos. When I crawled under the dock again, the Labrador mother dog didn't move away. She couldn't. I whispered, "Nessa," because saying girl felt too small for what she was doing. Her eyes tracked every inch of my reach, warning me without a sound. 3 newborn puppies wriggled against her belly. One little pup stayed too still, tucked under her foreleg like a secret. You know that awful moment when you're trying to stay calm, but your chest won't listen. I slid the towel under the puppies first, slow and flat, so it didn't scrape the concrete. She let out a rough, broken growl that was more air than threat. I didn't touch her face. I just kept my voice low and steady and let her hear it. "Hey, Nessa," I whispered. "You did your job." I offered warm water on the tip of a bottle cap. The dog sniffed once, then took a tiny sip, like it cost her pride. I lifted the 3 living Labrador puppies together, all in one bundle, and pressed them to the heat of my jacket. Their squeaks got louder, then steadier. That was the first relief I'd felt all morning. But the quiet pup didn't answer. The mother Labrador nudged him with her nose, then looked at me like she was asking for the impossible. I called the clinic, then the volunteer line I knew would pick up early. I said I had a Labrador retriever and 4 pups in the snow, and we were losing minutes. Behind me, her breathing hitched, and her head sagged toward the puppies like she was falling asleep on her feet. Then I heard tires crunching closer on the slush outside the dock. The van's siren sounded wrong in that quiet, white morning. Sound bounced off the warehouse walls and died fast in the cold. 2 volunteers swung the doors open, their boots sinking into slush as they followed my tracks under the loading dock. "Back here," I called, keeping my voice low for the Labrador and her puppies, not for them. Nessa's eyes flicked toward the noise, then back to my hands. She was shaking harder now, every breath a shallow drag. One of the guys knelt a few feet away, holding out a folded blanket like a peace flag. "She a Labrador mix?" he whispered. "Pure lab far as I can tell," I said. "Just out of luck." We moved slow, like you do when a scared dog is the only thing holding 4 tiny lives together. I shifted the 3 living puppies closer to my chest. Their little bodies pressed into my shirt, warm spots against the sting of the air. The still pup lay by her leg, fur already cooling, tubbed back, silence louder than any cry. Nessa let out a sound then that didn't fit in any category. Not a growl, not a whine, just a low, breaking noise that made the younger volunteer look away. She nosed the quiet pup once, twice. Then she turned her head and rested her muzzle on my wrist. If you've ever had a dog tell you, "Go ahead," without a word, you know how heavy that permission feels. I lifted the tiny body, cradled it like it was still breathing, and tucked it gently into a separate corner of the blanket. One of the volunteers slid a soft loop over Nessa's neck, not pulling, just guiding. Her legs buckled when she tried to stand, so we carried her on the blanket instead, a Labrador mother dog who'd finally spent every last piece of strength. We loaded her and the puppies into the van, heaters already blasting. Snow swirled in as the doors closed, cold chasing us for a second before it was shut out. I climbed in beside the crate, listening to the faint squeaks of 3 newborn pups and the labored breathing of their mother, and I knew this ride was going to decide more than one life. We cut through the slush like the whole city was holding its breath. The van heater roared, but the air around the crate still felt cold. Nessa lay on her side, the Labrador mother dog barely lifting her head when the puppies squeaked. I kept my hand on the crate door so she could smell me. 3 tiny Labrador puppies were piled together, noses pushing at the blanket for a dog they couldn't reach. Every time one pup cried, her ear twitched like she was trying to answer from the bottom of a well. "You're not done yet, girl," I murmured. The driver swung us around a corner, harbor lights smearing over wet glass. For a moment, all I heard was tire noise and her rough, uneven breathing. We backed up to the clinic doors. A tech rushed out with a gurney, bundled in a thick coat, eyes already on the crate. "What have we got?" she asked. "Labrador, young dog, 4 puppies," I said. 3 alive, 1 gone, and a mom who's given everything she has. We lifted Nessa out first. Her paws dangled, limp, her chest fluttering in quick, shallow bursts. On the table, she tried to curl toward the sound of the pups, but her body wouldn't obey. A vet in scrubs and snow boots stepped in. "Name?" he asked, stethoscope in hand. "Nessa," I said. He nodded once and leaned close to the exhausted dog. "Okay, Nessa," he whispered. "Let's see what you've got left." They clipped lines to her, slid a tube in, checked gums, heart, lungs. Words like hypothermia and shock bounced off the white walls. I stood there holding a box of 3 shivering pups. Then the vet finally looked at me. "If this Labrador has any chance," he said quietly, "we start right now." And I knew this was the part of rescue you never see in pictures, the fight that begins after the truck stops moving. They rushed Nessa past the doors while I stayed in the hall with the crate. A tech took the 3 Labrador puppies from my arms and set them under a heat lamp, tiny bodies piled in a shaking knot. Without their mother dog, their cries sounded thin, too small for a hallway full of metal and tile. I dropped onto a chair, coat still wet from the snow. 1 pup rooted blindly at the fleece, a little Labrador nose bumping into nothing. Another lay still, then let out 1 sharp squeak that cut straight through me. You don't have to be a vet to know when a puppy is fighting something you can't see. Through the window in the door, I could see the Labrador mother on the table. Drips hanging, blankets piled, the vet moving with that tight calm that means things are bad. Severe cold stress, I heard. Old bruising along the ribs. These didn't happen last night. The storm hadn't done this alone. Someone had. They slipped an oxygen line over her muzzle, and even from here I could see her chest stutter. The tech from earlier came back, hands smelling like antiseptic and winter air. "She's tougher than she looks," he said quietly. "Most dogs would have gone down days ago." I nodded, staring at the sleeping Labrador pups under the lamp. "Most dogs don't have 3 lives pinned to their heartbeat," I said. He glanced at me. "House full?" he asked. "Because if she makes it, those puppies can't stay here long. We don't have the staff for bottle feeding every 2 hours." I looked at the 3 rescued puppies, pressed so close they looked like one lump of fur under the light. In that hallway, I understood something heavy. If this Labrador family was going to have a future, it had to start on my kitchen floor at home, not in this bright, humming room. Night came down hard and quiet, the kind of cold that eats sound. I drove with the heater on full and still felt the chill in my bones. On the seat beside me, the 3 Labrador puppies shifted inside a cardboard box lined with an old sweatshirt. Their tiny bodies bumped against each other every time I hit a patch of ice. At home, the house greeted us with the same familiar silence. No TV, no music, just the hum of the fridge and the wind at the windows. I cleared a space in the kitchen like muscle memory, moving a chair, laying out towels, plugging in a small heating pad I hadn't touched in years. Funny how fast an empty room can remember what it's like to hold life again. I fed the puppies one by one, a bottle for each tiny mouth. Warm formula, careful angles, the slow rhythm of a hand holding a life that doesn't know your name yet. One pup latched on right away, a little dog with more fight than weight. Another fussed and squirmed, impatient and loud. The smallest one paused between sips, shivering even under the lamp. I rubbed his side gently until his body remembered how to try. I'd told myself I was done with fostering after my old Labrador passed 2 winters back. I'd packed away the bowls, the beds, the chewed leashes. I thought I was finished breaking my heart on dogs that always left, one way or another. But here I was, kneeling on cold tile at midnight, watching 3 new lives breathe in my kitchen. The phone rang just after 1 in the morning. Dr. Patel's voice was low, careful. "She's holding on," he said. "Your Labrador mama is still in rough shape, infection, organ stress, but she's fighting." I swallowed hard, looking at the box of sleeping pups. "Tell Nessa her puppies are warm," I said. "Tell her they're loud and stubborn and making a mess of my house." He chuckled once, tired. "I'll tell her," he said. After the call, I lay down on the floor beside the box, my arm draped over the edge so they could smell me. One little pup stretched out and pressed his paw against my wrist like he was taking roll call. In that moment, I understood the twist I hadn't seen coming. I wasn't just saving this Labrador family. They were pulling me back into a life I'd quietly stepped away from. Morning came gray over the harbor windows. The 3 Labrador puppies were still huddled in the cardboard box beside the heating pad, breaths fast and shallow in the quiet kitchen. My back ached from the floor, but I didn't move until I'd counted 3 moving bellies. Then I warmed fresh formula and fed them in turns, tiny mouths working clumsy against the bottles. The big pup grabbed his bottle like the world owed him breakfast, a young dog already full of stubborn life. The middle one squeaked and pawed at my fingers, a little Labrador who seemed to need touch more than milk. The smallest hesitated until I rubbed his ribs and talked to him, voice low and stupid and desperate. And when he finally sucked steady, the room felt a shade less cold. By the second feeding, they'd earned names in my head. Doc for the bold one, Fern for the soft, noisy one, Harbor for the smallest Labrador who made my heart stop every time he paused. Between feedings, I called the clinic for news on their Labrador mother. Nessa was still on fluids and oxygen, still trapped in that thin space between staying and letting go. Her numbers bad, but her eyes tracking every sound like she was listening for something familiar. As evening settled in, I set out old bowls, built a nest of towels by the fridge, and listened to 3 rescued puppies fill the silence my old dog had left behind. Just before dark, Dr. Patel called again and said, "She's fighting, Evan, but I don't know how long her body can keep up. If you can bring the puppies in tomorrow, hearing them might give her something to hold on to." I looked at Doc, Fern, and Harbor tangled under the lamp, and understood that tomorrow might be the only chance we had to show Nessa what her fight had done. The next morning, the snow was falling sideways, the kind that erases tire tracks in minutes. I tucked the 3 Labrador puppies into a laundry basket lined with a flannel shirt, set a warm bottle under the blanket, and carried them out to the truck. Doc complained the whole way. Fern chewed on the edge of the towel, and Harbor just shook in that small, stubborn way that makes you want to wrap a puppy in your whole life. The drive into Duluth felt longer than the night before. Salt trucks rumbled past, spraying slush against the doors. Inside, the basket on the seat beside me was a small world of breathing, squeaking, rescued puppies who didn't know today might be the only time they'd see their Labrador mother dog awake. By the time we pulled into the clinic lot, my knuckles were white on the wheel. Dr. Patel met us at the door, eyes tired behind his glasses. "She had a rough night," he said quietly. "Your Labrador girl's numbers are shaky, but she's still here." We walked down the hall together, my boots squeaking on wet tile, the basket bumping against my leg with every step. Nessa lay on her side in recovery, wrapped in blankets, lines taped to her leg, chest moving in short, careful breaths. For a second, I thought she was asleep. Then Doc squeaked from the basket, a sharp little sound that cut through the beeping. One of her ears twitched. Her eyes cracked open, unfocused, then searching. We set the basket on a low stool beside her head and folded back the blanket. 3 tiny Labrador puppies tumbled into view, noses working, bodies leaning toward the scent that had built their whole world. Nessa swallowed once, tried to lift her head, and failed, but her nose stretched forward, just an inch, as if she was trying to count them. The monitor beside her ticked up by a single beat. No miracle, no sudden fix. Just one tired heart pushing a little harder at the sound of 3 small lives. And standing there with snow melting off my coat, I knew we were asking this Labrador mother for one more fight she hadn't planned on giving. By the next morning, the snow had turned to a hard gray crust. The harbor road was quiet, just a few trucks rumbling in the distance. I walked into the clinic with my hands already cold, even though the heat was on full blast inside. Dr. Patel was waiting by the end of the hall. One look at his face, and my stomach knew before he spoke. "She slipped away just before dawn," he said softly. "Your Labrador girl's heart just ran out of road." The words didn't echo. They just landed and stayed. He led me into the recovery room anyway. Nessa lay on the blanket, muzzle resting on her paws like she'd finally found a position that didn't hurt. The lines were gone, the machine silent, the little screen dark. For a second, my brain tried to pretend she was just sleeping, a tired dog waiting for the next shift. I put my hand on her shoulder, feeling only the memory of warmth. "She waited until the puppies settled," Dr. Patel said. "She watched them after you left. We all saw it. That Labrador knew they were out of danger." I didn't answer. I just traced one rib with my thumb, thinking about snow under a dock and 4 tiny bodies pressed into her side. In the lobby, a tech brought out the basket. 3 rescued puppies, eyes still closed, noses already working the air like they were searching for something they'd never touch again. Doc kicked at the blanket. Fern squeaked once, impatient. Harbor pressed his face into my wrist and stayed there. They didn't know their mother dog was gone. I carried the basket back to the truck, the wind cutting across the lot. It hit me then that every breath these Labrador puppies took from here on out would be borrowed from her. And as I set them on the seat beside me and started the engine, I realized I had to decide what to do with 3 lives that didn't understand how much had already been spent on them. I thought pulling that Labrador family out from under the dock would be the hardest part. It wasn't. The hardest part came weeks later, with snow still piled down the alley and 3 growing Labrador puppies turning my quiet house into a hurricane. Doc learned to slide across the kitchen tile like it was ice, paws everywhere. Fern followed me room to room, a little dog who needed to touch my ankle every few steps just to make sure I was still there. Harbor, the smallest Labrador pup, watched everything from a half step back, eyes solemn, staying close enough to feel my shadow. We'd moved from bottles to soft food, from heat lamps to wrestling matches on the living room rug. If you've ever raised a litter of Labrador puppies inside 4 walls, you know there's no such thing as background noise anymore. Life gets loud in all the best and worst ways. The rescue posted their photos online, 3 chocolate Labrador pups with snow on their noses and my old flannel in the background. Applications came in fast. Retired couples, young families, people who wrote long messages about how ready they were to love a dog. I told myself what every foster tells himself. You're just the bridge. You don't get to be the destination. We set a meet and greet day at the clinic, and I loaded 3 wiggling rescued puppies into the truck, trying not to think about how quiet the ride home might be. Doc left first. A widower with kind eyes knelt down, and that bold Labrador pup dropped a chewed tennis ball right into his hand like they'd rehearsed it. Fern went next, climbing into the lap of a woman who couldn't have children and refusing to get back down. That left Harbor. A family with 2 kids came for him, all smiles and soft voices. They knelt, they coaxed, and he wagged, polite and gentle. But when they opened their car door, Harbor turned, trotted back, and pressed his whole small dog body against my boots like he'd found the only shore he trusted. The father saw my face, then the Labrador pup glued to my legs, and he gave a quiet nod. "Looks like he's already picked," he said. And standing there in the parking lot with Harbor's heartbeat shaking against my hand, I realized I wasn't sending all 3 rescued puppies away after all. Harbor settled into my life so quietly, I didn't notice the day the house stopped echoing. He slept where the Labrador puppy's box had been, in a battered bed by the radiator, legs twitching in dreams that still smelled like snow. When I moved from room to room, that young dog shadowed me on soft paws along the floorboards, never more than a few steps behind. By March, the drifts along the Harbor Road had shrunk into low ridges. Harbor had outgrown bottles in the wobble walk. He was a solid Labrador puppy now, all paws and ears, curiosity stuffed into a body that hadn't caught up yet. He chased blown coffee cup lids down the sidewalk like they were wild birds, then slammed on the brakes to check my face, making sure the game was still allowed. At night, when he slept with his head on my boot, I scrolled through photos of Doc and Fern in their new homes, rescue dogs sprawled on couches, while dog lovers online asked for updates on their story. Sometimes Harbor would sit up out of nowhere, ears pricked, staring toward the front door like he heard something I didn't. Maybe it was the wind in the stairwell. Maybe some part of a Labrador pup always listens for a heartbeat that isn't in the room anymore. Those moments cut deepest, reminders that this abandoned puppy had come through more darkness than most people knew. One Saturday, the sky finally turned blue instead of steel. Ice broke free on the lake, clinking at the edge of the pier. I clipped on Harbor's leash and opened the truck door. He jumped in like he'd been waiting for that invite his whole life. I didn't say where we were going, but my hands knew before my head did. The road we took was the route that had once held a snowbank, a loading dock, and a Labrador mother who never got her own ride home. The loading dock looked smaller without the snowbanks, just a strip of stained concrete and a sagging chain-link gate. I parked in the same spot as that morning and cut the engine. For a second, the only sound was Harbor's tail thumping against the seat. Then I opened the door, and he leapt down like the young Labrador puppy he'd finally become, sure-footed and ready. He sniffed the air once and pulled me toward the shadow under the dock. No drift now, just old pallets, rusted bolts, a dark patch where ice had melted and dried again. Harbor lowered his nose to the ground, moving slow, tracing a line only he could smell. Right where Nessa had curled around 4 newborn puppies, he stopped and sat without a word. He looked up at me, eyes steady, and I swear there was something older than his months staring back. A dog who didn't know the whole story, but carried its ending in his bones. I sank down beside him, back against the cold wall. The wind pushed at the broken fence, soft and tired. If you hadn't cried that morning, I said quietly, I would have driven past. Harbor shifted closer, the weight of a growing Labrador pressed against my side. Dogs never betray the ones who show up for them. They just keep loving, even when the world has already walked away. You don't have to be in rescue to know that. You just have to remember the first time a dog chose to sit beside you when they had every right to leave. When people ask why I still pull over for a shaking shape in a snowstorm, I think of Nessa, a Labrador mother dog who turned a frozen loading dock into a shelter with nothing but her body and her will. Her puppies are sprawled on clean floors now, loud and safe. Rescue dogs in homes full of dog lovers who will never know how dark their first nights were. Harbor nudged my hand, and I thought of all the abandoned puppy faces I've seen that never got this far. If this little Labrador's journey from snow and steel to a warm bed stayed with you, share it with someone who listens to dog stories and believes rescue dogs matter. The more we pass on a story like this, the more likely it is that the next frightened pup crying in the dark gets heard in time. One dog at a time, one quiet choice at a time, we turn a single rescue into a trail of hope for every paw still waiting in the cold.